The new design means babies like China won't have to leave the neonatal intensive care unit for specialised x-rays. Examining the newborns in their ward rather than moving them can make a crucial difference.
Some of these babies are very critically ill and very unstable, so any movement outside of the normal environment here in the ward for them is dangerous.
There's more than 800 admissions a year to this ward, and the mobile table was designed by two of the people who care for them. Its polycarbonate top needs less radiation to penetrate it than traditional methods, and the quality of the image is also improved.
Enables us to bring the examination table right in alongside their cribs and get the study done without having to move them and rearrange ventilator tubes and other life support systems on them.
While the neonatal intensive care unit is the only one of its kind between Sydney and Brisbane, it's hoped other hospitals will follow the John Hunter's lead and take on the new equipment. Brooke Webster, NBN News.
A stiff neck or severe headache, or a rash that begins out as a small dot, red dot, pinpoint rash, starts spreading over the body within minutes to hours and can become dark purplish.
It was 6 months ago that Mineral Deposits Limited applied to have its lease extended at the Fullerton mine on Stockton Beach, as well as mining on the old rifle range. And even though the application has been approved by most bodies concerned, the final go-ahead is yet to be given from the Department of Urban Affairs and Planning, as well as the Premier's Department.
Port Stephens Council has unanimously endorsed the application, and given their agreement, it's just sitting in Macquarie Street now, and that's not good enough. Get it done, get it sorted out, and give these people some certainty.
Workers rallied today outside Senator Tierney's office in Newcastle, hoping to give the issue the momentum they claim it's so far been lacking.
You really only got about 4 weeks' work, and then they've just got to stop the plant, nowhere else to go. That can only mean redundancies.
While no lease expansion would be welcome news for environment groups, it could be devastating for mine workers, unsure whether they'll have a job when the current lease runs out.
You're on a situation there now where you could be made redundant tomorrow, and redundancy is not going to pay my wage. You know, I want a permanent job.
They also claim that if the expansion is not signed off by mid-February, they'll take their protest to the steps of State Parliament. Adam Harper, NBN News.
The seriously ill toddler was taken from her mother by DOCS officers yesterday, fearing her life was in danger. Today, the child was treated for an urgent bowel obstruction at the John Hunter Children's Hospital. Her 29-year-old mother and 23-year-old stepfather had removed her from the same hospital on Tuesday night, after doctors examining the child had requested further medical tests.
The mother of the child and her partner were interviewed last night by police regarding the circumstance of the child's removal from the hospital.
Detectives have not laid charges against either adult. The child's stepfather, 23-year-old Daniel Christopher Hansen, today faced Belmont Court on 2 unrelated matters relating to driving while disqualified and a charge of breaching parole. The Department of Community Service is continuing its investigation. It will continue to care for the young child's 2 sisters, aged 5 and 8. Police were again today praising the help of the community in finding the 20-month-old toddler at a Windale address. Vanessa Trezise, NBN News.
Kerry Chigorovsky and her team walked the streets of Newcastle this morning drumming up pre-election support, despite not even having a Liberal candidate.
Our commitment is to be here constantly over the next couple of years and beyond.
But despite identifying the city as the key to the state's development, the opposition was not taking a stand on one of the issues dividing public opinion and the city, whether or not to stop trains at Civic.
I've just been briefed by your chamber about the rail line, and they've got a number of proposals which they're going to give me further details on.
The best the Liberals could offer was the promise of a clear transport policy by 2003. That's despite their recognition of calls for immediate action. Supporters of the light rail proposal as part of an integrated transport plan say they're looking for state and local government leadership on the issue, but they believe that the answer to the controversy and what Newcastle really needs is a swinging seat.
The Liberals come and drop a carrot now and then, but really they think of us as safe Labor.
Brooke Webster, NBN News.
(1991) and Newcastle's then National Soccer League side, the Breakers, score a fantastic first home game win against South Melbourne. A fresh-faced Andy Roberts was in that team.
I can remember that vividly, my first game. You always remember your first game, and we played South Melbourne at the time. They were current NSL champions, as they are now, and we flogged them 3-1. So it'd be nice to get that sort of result tomorrow night when we play Melbourne Knights.
10 years later, and he can't believe he's about to head out for his 200th top-grade match.
I've been there for the good times and the bad times. Last season was a bit of a highlight for me. But probably one drawback is not playing finals football with Newcastle. That's something that I'd like to achieve in my career.
If it's to happen this year, things must change quickly for the side sitting second last, starting with a win against the Melbourne Knights tomorrow. Injuries have stripped the side short again, with coach Lee Sterry still unsure whether to play the injured Chris Zoricic and as Josh Ferguson on standby. Vasco Trasevski will come into the midfield for his first starting 11 appearance this season, while Asala Massey will warm the bench with the recalled Peter Junknowitz. Sterry opting to start striker Andy Harper alongside John Bonavolia, hoping the reunion will spark an old winning formula.
Everybody recognises that coal is a difficult source of energy in terms of the environment. But what people don't recognise is that it's actually the only source of energy for major supply that we're going to have available for the next 30 years. And so we have to do something about making it a sustainable source of energy.
In just 2 months, more than 100 fake driver's licences or proof of age cards have been confiscated by Newcastle police, the majority handed in by nightclub bouncers. Police believe some teenagers had fooled the Roads and Traffic Authority with fake documents.
We've also got a number of situations where people have just attempted to alter existing driver's licences. Now, sometimes that may be found, sometimes it may have been received through some stolen property, but also in many cases has also been given to them.
Last month, police first started getting serious about fake IDs after a 2-night crackdown netted 30 from one Newcastle establishment. Up until now, the most severe punishment for offenders would be a $55 fine, but that's changed.
But the number's grown now where he believes that the licensing police believe that they should be taking the people to court for it, so they will be summoned to appear in court where the fines could be up to $1,500.
Meantime, some of Newcastle's best-known sportsmen are starring in a new awareness campaign centring on violence against women.
Just to actually bring it out into the open, just normalise talking about it. It's one of those crimes that are often hidden, and just for guys to stand up and say, yeah, we don't like violence against women, that does affect us as men in the community.
Posters carrying anti-violent messages will this week start appearing nationally. Vanessa Trezise, NBN News. For years, unions have warned the nation's manufacturing sector is in crisis. Newcastle is now leading the charge to do something about it. A cross-section of community leaders today gathering for the latest Make It Here task force meeting.
I believe the importance for us has got to be simply to take the issue to the people. Bring awareness to the people, let them decide if it's a major issue for this country.
Among the resolutions, the petitioning of candidates in the nation's 10 marginal seats and the commencement of a social audit on the impact of job losses. While all political parties recognise the need to have a stronger manufacturing base in Australia and less imports, the AMWU argues none, not even Labor, has a strong policy commitment to that objective.
We need a policy that dictates that a certain amount of work on a major infrastructure project will be sourced from Australia, sourced locally.
Meantime, more than 350 Comsteel workers have returned to work after a 48-hour strike. Employees so far unsuccessful in their plight to have the company reveal from which divisions it plans to sack 24 workers. Vanessa Trezise, NBN News.
There were some interested observers at Marathon Stadium last night, but it took the visiting Knights less than 60 seconds to make themselves right at home with a gift goal for Toto da Costa. Vasco Tresepski scored a yellow card in his first run on start this season, but it was Melbourne goals that kept flowing, Joel Porter finishing some sparkling lead-up work. Da Costa's second was all his own making and completed a whirlwind opening. Finally, Newcastle got going, but the few first-half chances came and went without result. Chasing 3 goals is tough enough, but doing it with one less man is near impossible, and when Tresepski was controversially booked again and sent off, that's what United was faced with. A minute after the break, and Newcastle was chasing 4, with ex-Carlton skipper Andrew Marth landing a long-range bomb. Some respite for the home side when John Bonavolia landed the lone goal. Melbourne should have had another, but this wasn't given. Just 1 minute later and it didn't matter, as the Knights completed a 5-1 rout.
It's becoming an all too familiar sight in the Hunter Valley. Another train derailment, cargo lost and rail lines damaged. In this case, the train was en route to Newcastle Port with 5,500 tonnes of export coal from Bulga Mine west of Singleton. At 4 o'clock this morning, 2 wagons came off the tracks. Another 3 crashed onto their sides, spilling most of their load. 500 metres of the track has been destroyed. Both the driver and a crew member were breath tested, both returned negative readings. The Rail Access Corporation says there were no problems with the track or the signals. But a spokesperson from that same corporation at the scene refused to comment on a possible cause for the derailment. Freight trains, the Sydney to Brisbane XPTs and passenger services from Scone have all been disrupted, and the line is not expected to be clear until lunchtime on Tuesday. The Department of Transport has launched an investigation into the incident. The findings, though, are not expected for another 3 months. Catherine Turner, NBN News. You'd be forgiven for thinking it was 1800 at Waverley Honour in Pecolban. A mounted soldier here, a period costume there. It was all an attempt to recreate the way it was in the region, given Pecolban is steeped in civilian and old military history dating back to the 19th century. What was once Palmer's Lane is now aptly named Wine Lovers Lane, a musket volley marking the occasion. The Governor of New South Wales, His Excellency the Honourable Gordon Samuels, arrived in style and found time to chat to the troops. In another historical celebration, the National Maritime Festival descended on Newcastle Harbour. The first was back in 1834. Today it's a colourful combination of modern craft and boats from the past. This morning there was real proof of today's trends, a group of wakeboarders stealing the spotlight on the water. William IV was more than happy to take passengers for a Saturday afternoon cruise around the harbour. The festival continues tomorrow. Catherine Turner, NBN News.
Not only is it uncomfortable during the day, but high temperatures and breezes are also wreaking havoc at night time. Last night the conditions fuelled a fire which raged at West Wallsend, but fire crews eventually managed to bring it under control. Again today, the weather made conditions ideal for bushfires, another blaze flaring up, this time at Belmont, keeping fire crews on their toes. However, fire's not the only threat from the heat. People in the Hunter are suffering from the exhausting conditions.
Yesterday we were having quite a number of calls, a large number of calls from elderly people collapsing in the heat, and also we've had calls to young children experiencing difficulties with the heat, including one child that was locked in a car.
The ambulance service advises that people should be drinking more non-alcoholic and non-fizzy fluids and adjust their daily routine to avoid being in the sun during peak heat hours.
The heat wave that we've been experiencing in the Newcastle and Hunter at the moment places a lot of people at risk, but particularly the elderly and also the very young.
Hundreds of people today seem to have found at least one way to cool down, but should be prepared for at least another 2 days of stifling heat. Adam Harper, NBN News.
It's a language much like signing for the deaf. It's not a language of sound, it's a language of gestures.
After last week's 5-1 thrashing at the hands of the Melbourne Knights, Lee Sterry knows his team must turn the corner. And now, United conceded 3 goals in the first 15 minutes, a performance the coach today described as diabolical and a deficit far too great to overcome. The players too are feeling the pressure.
I can see in their faces and this, that, the other, the slightest little thing goes wrong at training. You know, they're all short in the fuse department at the moment.
Sterry is also intent on giving United's fans another victory, well aware they've gone home disappointed and frustrated more often than not.
Players and myself, we all take it to heart when we don't give them what they require, and that's 3 points and positive vibes about the clubs, because we are trying our best.
Friday night's lineup is still missing Serjan and Zoricic through injury, and 1 week suspensions have accounted for Tripchevsky and McManus. Sekenis and Wicherek returned to a 16-man squad, while youth player Josh Rufo has also been named. 1 player will be dropped before the match. United is up against Eastern Pride, a team renowned for its doggedness.
Certainly they're fighters, they're street fighters, and they're not going to give in for 90 minutes, so it's not going to be a game that's going to be won in 10 or 15 minutes, that's for sure.
Kick-off 7:30 at Marathon Stadium. Catherine Turner, NBN News.
Third in an international regatta last week, second in the national championships last time around, and first in today's practice event on Lake Macquarie. You'd have to think Michael Lancey is the early favourite, but don't try telling that to the modest 19-year-old.
We're doing so many different races over the Australian summer circuit that it really doesn't matter how good of a reputation you have. It's basically on the day if you're up to it.
The 3-day event, hosted by Toronto's Royal Motor Yacht Club, has attracted up to 60 sailboarders, and not just from Australia. Second-ranked Brazilian Martin Cordiali has made the trip, taking the chance to sightsee and improve his English while he's here.
Very good place. I think now we start a good championship here.
Slovakian Robert Hostak will also be out to upset the locals.
Top 3 will be alright for me, but if I win, I'll be really happy.
Racing begins tomorrow and continues over the long weekend. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Meanwhile, the people of Maitland celebrated the day with a great Aussie tradition, throwing a few snags on the barbecue. Cessnock was not to be outdone, however, with many of its citizens dressing up for the occasion. And Australia's traditional owners were not to be left out of the town's official celebrations. And it wouldn't be Australia Day without a rendition of Waltzing Matilda, played on the bagpipes. In Hinton, the big-hitting axemen showed off their prowess and massive power. Maitland's Steve Kirk showing how it's done in the standing block event. Meanwhile, in the blue water wonderland of Nelson Bay, many enjoyed another Australia Day tradition of going to the beach. Crowds were also entertained at a billy cart derby, drivers showing off their ingenuity and skill. Some revellers soaked up the atmosphere and got into the groove, while others tried to cool off in the midday heat. A flyover by the RAF capped off the celebrations. Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
It might look like racing, but it seems there's much more to it. Held at the MG Car Club's Ringwood circuit north of Newcastle, the car control course involves lessons on vehicle and driving safety, the program prompted by members.
They wanted their children to be involved in some sort of driving activity above and beyond what's available through normal open channels.
Instructors approved by the Confederation of Australian Motorsports sit in with drivers, giving them pointers on how to control a vehicle under difficult conditions. While the benefits for competition are obvious, both the club and police say the skills learned can be easily applied in day-to-day driving.
Healthy respect for speed, discipline, anticipation, and trying to be able to predict how a motor car handles in an emergency situation.
As far as giving them basic skills to make them better drivers on the road, we would fully support any kind of these courses.
The club hopes to hold another 3 such days this year. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Adam is a 10-year-old thoroughbred gelding who was being primed for dressage competitions. But when thieves cut down the fence keeping the horse in his paddock at Nelson Bay, those plans changed. Now all that owner Jenny Hamilton wants is to see him again.
They've cut through the fence where my horse was kept, walked him around about 2 blocks up the street, actually closer into the houses at Nelson Bay, and they've loaded him onto a float and taken him from there.
Neighbours reported that they saw a car pulling a horse float away from the paddock, but so far no one has been able to identify the car. And while Jenny may have resigned herself to the possibility of never riding her horse again, she still wants to prevent this kind of theft from happening to anyone else.
Horse thieves, they're not uncommon. It's happening an awful lot. A lot of people have it, and it's got to be stopped. They're stealing people's pets.
Or in Jenny's case, it's like losing a family member.
Spent at least 5 days a week the last 2 years, going out riding and feeding twice a day. Basically I've done everything with him.
Adam Harper, NBN News.
Josh Perry stormed onto the top grade scene last year with a powerful display against Auckland that drew comparisons between he and Paul Harrigan.
Yeah, I just want to be my own player, I think, not look up to anyone else and just do my own thing.
Stripping weight in the off-season, Perry continued to make his presence felt at the weekend against the Tigers as the race for front row positions continues, and he'd love to become one of the team's regulars.
Yeah, I hope so. Joey and that's been talking to me a fair bit, and I've had a couple of chats with Butts and that, and everything's going pretty well.
It's going to be tough though, with Glenn Grief showing great form and Matt Parsons back this week from injury. The squad to play Parramatta at Maitland on Saturday night includes Matt Gidley. He'll start at centre but will spend time at 5/8 with Andrew Johns also returning. Hooker Danny Medeiros has special leave for a wedding and is replaced by Ben Donaldson, while Daniel Smales is on standby for Clinton O'Brien, who has a shoulder injury.
If he wasn't confident of getting through the game, we wouldn't risk him at this stage.
As for Adam McDougall, his race to be ready for the season start continues.
I know he's had a number of scans done yesterday to assess where he's up to, so hopefully we might know by the end of the week if he's available for the first game or not.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The
dispute centres on this 3.2 metre strip of land at Portside Business Park, part of which backs onto 27 homes on Downey Street, Maryville. When developers began converting the former mobile fuel depot in 1997, they agreed to erect a fence along the residents' properties on land owned by the developers. But the DA also called for remediation of the contaminated site, an order developers claim is the responsibility of residents.
They reckon in the letter that they sent us, if it was proved that we had polluted the ground, that we would have to pay for the remediation, pay for the new fence, and I'll go to jail before I pay anything, mate, for what I earned laying in the mud in New Guinea.
And the dispute hit home for Anna Grujev this week when developers erected a temporary fence through part of her backyard, which adjoins a garage approved by council.
Over 20 years when they applied for the garage. And the builder approved, and the water board come in and had a look, and everything approved.
But council says residents aren't to blame.
I think this may not have been an issue if the developer hadn't initiated it.
Helen Kapelos, NBN News.